and welcome to this week's review of the latest episode of My Hero Academia. Before I get into the review itself, I want to know what you thought about this week's episode. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and you will get read out in next week's show. Also, be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTube stuff that you want to do, because YouTube is increasing its carry plays small content creators. Support your local small content creator today, it will do them a power of good. Now, on to the review. Actually, just one more thing before we get into the review itself. Forgive me if the audio quality isn't up to snuff this week. My usual microphone has died. I think that the phantom power supply for it is bitten the dust. And I'm now having to use my old bottle microphone. And, well, this is my, I'll be honest, 5th attempt in recording this review. First time I reviewed it, I did the entire review. And then I realised, though, due to audio problems that couldn't be fixed in post-processing, that it just sounded even worse than it does now, so forgive me. But with all that said and done, let us get into something good. Let us get into the positives about this week's episode. And I have to say that I enjoyed just about everything that we saw with Bakugo in this week's episode. It was well paced and thoughtful, and adding depth to a character who, regrettably, as far as the wider pop culture miasma is concerned, is often just seen as being the loud, explodey one, which, to be honest, given events in this season and previous seasons, has always felt like an unfair assessment to me, as I've always felt that the character themselves has been far more nuanced than, honestly, I believe that some people give credit for, and he's probably one of the few genuinely authentic feeling teenagers within the group. Sure, a lot about his mood is played up for laughs and it's exaggerated to the point of being cartoonish, but he feels like a genuine human being far more so than some of the other characters in our cast. And arguably he's the victim of his quirk, though that is a whole other discussion for a whole other time. I have to say that I do regret the fact that I wasn't recording my reaction to this week's episode when we got to the moment where Aizawa was cutting his own leg off. It was just flooring, really. It just knocked me over. I'll be honest, when I saw him drawing his blade last week, there was two conclusions that I came to. Either he was, one, going to try and cut the bullet out of his leg before it took effect, or two, he was just going to go in and try and stab Tomura to death. Of course, we didn't get that. Instead, he decided to go on full Evil Dead on his leg, which, I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting to see something quite that bloody and violent that early in the morning, but my god, it really did leave a statement, didn't it? I feel the sequence towards the start of the episode where we had the members of Class A and B starting to question not just their actions, but the actions of the heroes themselves was a great moment. It is something that we touched upon in the previous video, or rather, a far more articulate commentator discussed in the comment sections of the previous video, which I then elaborated upon towards the end of it. We're starting to see this moment where things are starting to turn, where questions are starting to be asked, where it feels like we're starting to get to a point where things might start falling apart. I am sure that in future weeks we'll probably see a few fan videos by people coming up with a perfect team as to who should have carried out this mission and who should have been there to make sure that the victory came the way of the heroes, but, you know, that's not really something we're going to be doing here and now. But, again, I did appreciate the fact that we are starting to see our characters be a little bit more critical and being a little bit more analytical as to the way things are going right now as far as superhero world and superhero culture itself is done. I know that I say this every week, but I feel that the animation in this program just continues to just be stellar. The sheer amount of emotional range that we can convey in some of our characters, and the depths at which that can come across with just some moments as simple as just the posture of certain characters in the way that they look, can convey so much. Like in that moment we have Bakugo and All Might talking, just how you see Bakugo in that moment, to this deep contemplative look that he has upon him, this realization as to who he truly is and how he wants to deep down try and make up for all the shitty things he did to Midoriya, but he just doesn't know when the time is right to be able to do that. So he's just there trying to figure out all this stuff out. This moment of almost existential reflection upon his past actions shows a level of maturity which, once again, we don't often see with a character, and is one that is often overlooked. The action sequences that we saw throughout this episode were frequently rather brutal, and there's really no other way in describing it. Not the most brutal that we've seen in the series as a whole, but certainly some of the most we've seen of this season. Just seeing Midoriya throw himself into harm's way like this is rather gruesome at times. Just this sheer level of desperation that he has in trying to put an end to this here and now, which is understandable because as far as he's concerned, this is their one and only chance to put an end to all of this, and he's going to take every opportunity that he can do even if deep down he might feel that he doesn't quite have what it takes. And of course, towards the end of the episode, we have these two great moments where All For One is taken over Tomura's body, and with Bakugo's sacrifice. It really is hard for me to convey my thoughts and feelings on those things, partly due to the fact that this is like my 5th or 6th attempt in doing this review, but I really do feel that the way in which they conveyed Bakugo's thoughts and his thought process in the moment with sacrificing, that flashback sequence and the artistic flair they're in, just looked really spectacular. Just the effect that he had on some of the clips almost made it like we were flashing back to some far older anime. We're looking at back one from the 1980s, the 1990s. This editing that almost made it look like watching legacy clips from the program. We're watching just like a remake or a sequel series to that. To me, it just ticked a lot of boxes. Just this analog look to it all, and it just was a brilliant sequence as a whole. And of course, the bit with All For One taking over Tomura's body, that's the cliffhanger of this episode. And maybe this is the moment where people start to put 2 and 2 together as far as all this is concerned, but I feel that, well, actually I'm just going to leave that there because spoilers for things that have yet to happen have been spoilt for me, so I don't want to linger and anything on that any too longer than I need to, because there is a risk I might accidentally spoil stuff for other people, so I'm not going to get into that too much. With all that positivity out of the way, let us get into the negatives, and I will admit that these are nitpicks at the best of time, or at least one is. One of my feelings that I feel that is a certain negative towards this episode is that I feel that despite the fact the episode is named after him, Bakugo felt rather underutilised to me. He was just not used quite as much as I really think he should have been. He only really appeared in the final few minutes of the episode, and whilst what little that we saw of him was effective, and I do feel that he was very much the emotional core of the episode, I don't think it was really done to the same kind of scale as I feel it should have been. I don't watch the previews for future episodes. The only kind of hint I get as to what the episode is going to be about is the episode title itself, and I only really learn about that maybe a couple episodes before I do the review, so I was expecting something more. I was expecting an episode focused almost exclusively around him, and in the end we didn't end up getting that. That isn't to say that what we got wasn't good, but again, I was expecting so much more from it. And the other issue that I have, and I will admit this really is the biggest nitpick I think I've ever done for an episode of My Hero Academia, but I feel that the gag with Midoriya's hair wasn't handled well. I will just say here and now that I was watching the episode with the subtitles on, and just the sheer amount of text that was dedicated to explaining the joke and to why Midoriya's hair was like that was almost funnier than the joke itself. It felt like an entire paragraph was being dedicated to say, oh yeah, basically, me and Bakugo were training and he got the jump on me. Wah, wah. And maybe this is just a thing of just something that's been lost in translation from manga to anime, but whilst I did enjoy the joke in and of itself, it just felt rather jarring given everything else that was happening. The joke in and of itself fun, but given everything else was just so serious and just so dour and just so focused, to have a silly little gag like that just felt slightly out of pace. Now, of course, with that said, like I say, this might be something that might have worked better in the manga. Like, this episode might have been adapting 2 or 3 issues of it, where that gag wouldn't have seemed like much of a tonal shift. But here and now, it just kind of does. Of course, I will take any gags right now where I can get it, because I've got a feeling that we're going to see less and less of them as the whole series goes on. So I'll take them, even if it does feel like they're kind of a bit out of place. But still, overall, I feel that this was a really solid episode, and I did enjoy it quite a lot. Even if my enthusiasm for it has been tampered slightly due to the fact that I'm having to record this episode several times over with a microphone that I swore I'd never use again 10 years ago. But still, solid episode overall. With all that said and done, let us now get into Comment Corner! This week's comment comes from X1, who says, Tomura continues to look creepy AF, if not more so with each new episode. And I have to agree. The artists involved in this program just continue to outdo themselves almost episode by episode, in some cases scene by scene. As a commentator said in a previous video, I do feel that the quality of this year's animation just has been knocked to a whole other level, helped by the fact it is feeling a lot more consistent than we have had. I will admit that there are a couple moments in this week's episode where the animation wasn't quite up to snuff. Like there's the moment where Mineta's talking and it just looks like something that's been quickly thrown together. Just looks a little bit rushed, but hey, it's Mineta, and no one really likes Mineta, so it's not really a major loss. still, solid stuff all around, and the episode as itself was a hell of a lot of fun. I really did enjoy it. But what did you think about this week's episode, dear listener? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I will get back to you shortly. And you will be read out in next week's show. Well, should I be just like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants to do, because YouTube's an increasingly scary place for small content creators. Support your local small content creator today. It'll do them a power of good, and maybe, just maybe, if we get enough likes and enough comments, that'll will energy back into my phantom power supply to make my old microphone work, so I'm not having to use a microphone that was intended for a laptop. But still, we shall see. With all that said and done, thank you all for listening, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!